And welcome to our first Pray Tell live broadcast at the annual convention, which is taking place now in Grand Rapids. We're starting with a panel with some of the publishers, some of the real leaders in publishing for the needs of the American church. So we have 4 people with us today. I'm Father Anthony Ruff. I think, as you know, I'm the moderator of the blog. And today we will have an argument between, a discussion with Jerry Galipeau from World Library Publications, where Jerry is Vice President and Chief Publishing Officer. From on the left coast, we have Wisler. He's assistant to the publisher. We have Mark Lawson from St. Louis. He is with Morningstar and E.C. Shermer, and they are a part of the ECS publishing group. And then we have David Anderson from GIA in Chicago. So I look forward to a good discussion with the publishers. And I want to start by shaking it up a little bit like this. I'd like to put this out to you. You know, some people, I think, have the impression that publishers are just beady-eyed, greedy capitalists who will just sell anything just to make a profit. Theology be damned. We just have to go with the market force, market kind of thing. And it's just a get-rich-quick kind of proposition for publishers and for composers. Is that pretty much the case?
With most of them, but not with these 4.
Okay.
So, no,
okay.
not quite that bad. I don't think so. Actually, if the more you're involved in publishing, the more you realize that I think most companies have a fairly strong mission on their own, or they have at least started out of a concern to provide a certain kind of material or certain kind of actions. And to that, they do try to make a profit, but they don't try to do it on the backs of many people. I also think that probably the biggest misperception out there is how much actually that publishers do make on publications, because it's not what people think. It's always a little hard to make a profit in publishing these days. And so I just think that that's probably the biggest misperception, actually.
And I guess I would like to think that all of the publishers, most of the publishers, certainly our company, really has the people of God in mind, the diversity of needs, the type of music, the diversity of music that's called for, especially in the Roman liturgy. I think we really try to create and develop products that people ask for based upon needs in the parishes, you know. And again, there's a wide breadth of diversity in that, and I think various publishers try to kind of attend to those various needs to the best of their ability. So I think there's a lot of care and concern and thought into as when we're looking about appropriate resources for parishes.
And as many of the people at your place, and I think others as well, are practicing church musicians. Is that right?
Yeah. Our editorial staff are all practicing church musicians. Catholic, but we have a variety of folks that work in Protestant traditions. GIA has a lot of resources for both Catholic and communities.
Our folks as well are out on the weekends, which I think is a bit related to publishers making all of this money and being able to pay all of these wonderfully high salaries, which is just not the case. We need to supplement often what our job we're providing, but it also I think it keeps the companies balanced, because you have people right on the ground, right at the organ bench, right at the cantor stand. And if just following up on what you said, David, about the needs of the church, if that's our mission is the word needs, because we can publish anything we'd like to and engrave everything so beautifully, but if it's something that's not actually addressing the needs of the singing and praying church, then what's the point?
Absolutely. That was the point I was going to piggyback on as well, and it's that often we'll publish things that we know we'll never make a profit on. We published a Vietnamese hymnal a number of years ago. We'll probably never cover the costs of that, but the purpose of it was to meet a need in the church, and I know that's true of the other publishers as well. We have a mission to serve the needs of the church. we're not always, we're not throwing all of our resources into whatever happens to be perhaps the most popular or selling the best at the time. If there's a need, we try to address it.
Yeah, that's my impression. But I do wonder, is there ever a conflict, or even a conscience issue for any of you in that you have to respond to market forces, and that may not be what you want it to be? Is it ever a case that you would say, I sure wish this product would sell better rather than that one? I believe more in this one, but that one is really doing well.
I think for us, and this is a struggle I think sometimes among our staff members, is that if you're going to say we're going to serve the needs of the church, it's not necessarily the needs of the church that you like or the church your theological construct. We have to look out there and say, okay, that kind of segment of the church is really not where my heart is, but if there's a need there that needs to be filled, we have a responsibility as a publisher to address that need. And sometimes it's begrudgingly on some folks' parts, other times not so much. But it's a balancing act that we're always doing there.
I think we work with very creative people. And so all of our companies have people that we relate to, composers, writers, who are always, I don't want to say pushing the envelope, but they're always trying to advance the music, or they're trying to advance the congregational participation. They're the ones out there trying hard to continue to grow their art or to continue to grow the worship practice. And so our job sometimes is to sit back and say, wow, that's a little too progressive, or no, that's not progressive enough, or how do we balance this? So we're constantly working with these writers and musicians to not to rein them in, but to try to somehow mold it into a way that is usable by people.
And I think it's a delicate dance, but I think it's important to try to really honor the gift and the call of the composer, and that is a delicate dance from time to time, because sometimes a composer may have an idea that the company may not be open to, but we have to take that risk, and we have to kind of just think about the composer, the vocation of the composer, and sometimes and see how it goes. Sometimes it may not work out, and sometimes it'll be very successful for the church, for the company. People may like a particular project. So I think to really kind of rally for the composer, I think that's an important role that all of us do.
What's it like for composers? Is that a real get-rich-quick proposition for them? I don't have that impression. I mean, I know there are big names. They don't strike me as people that live high on the hog. I mean, they dress better than I do because everyone does, but I don't think it's a big capitalist thing for them, is it?
Not at all. In fact, like many of our staff members, as a couple of these gentlemen mentioned, they have second jobs as well. A lot of these folks are parish music directors, organists, or musicians. They tour or travel. They're doing a lot of other things to promote their art, their music. They're not living solely on their royalties or sales from their publications. So it's certainly a hard working life that they've chosen, a vocation. It's a beautiful vocation, but not necessarily a get-rich kind of thing.
And on the secular side of composition, many composers make more from commissions and make more from ASCAP royalties or BMI royalties, which just really are not available on the church side of composition. The commission levels are much lower, and then there are no performance royalties that come in from worship services, for example.
Yeah, okay. Relations like between the publishing houses. We all know, everybody talks about the big three, and then we have Mark, who's from another great publishing house. So you seem to be talking to each other on good terms here. Do you sort of see each other as colleagues, and we're working together, and we have a common Christian mission, but certainly there's also competition? What's that like?
I'll get us started, but I think it's a bit of a myth that the publishers are at each other's throats and sort of hate each other and are not cooperating. I think there's tremendous cooperation. That's what I see among the publishers. We all publish each other's music. We have to publish each other's music. I don't know if any of us could really survive purely on our own repertoire. We all need each other's music, and we depend on one another. And we are sharing music, and so I actually think it's a story out there that's maybe perhaps been exaggerated, kind of an urban myth or something. Are we competitive? You bet. There's competition, and Mark gave a good example earlier this morning, but we do. We get along, and there's good cooperation, probably much better, I think, than people realize.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. There is good cooperation, yet I mean we do have to protect. You know, our, you know, the kind of the focus. A lot of us have a particular focus or a nuanced focus with our publishing, and even in terms of missile products and hymnals and things like that. I think there is repertoire sharing. I think some of us probably are more open to a little more sharing than others. I think some of us do a little higher percentage of sharing, but it's clear that we are colleagues and that we are united in, I think, a common mission to worship music for the church. But I would like to debunk that myth too. I mean, there is a lot of with each year. I think there is a little more. We realize we need each other. We realize we need to look to each other's wisdom and expertise and to try to work together.
And all four companies are members of a group called the Church Music Publishers Association, in which I sit with Alec and we all meet once a year with stripes. And so there are often times that even people from these four companies sit down and have lunch together and talk just about the business. You know, you have to worry, when you're in a group like that, you have to worry about that there's no collusion about talking about certain subjects, you know. So you kind of avoid certain areas. But at the same time, sit down and discuss and talk, try to get a feel for what's going on at NPM in your view, or what's going on this side of the industry from your perspective. That kind of thing.
And the Catholic Association is the Association of Catholic Publishers, and what we call the heads of houses meet twice a year. So it's Alec and it's John Lim and me. It's cordial. I'll be honest and say that at the core of our mission, it's operating with other Catholic publishers, but I mean it's part of what we have to do, and I think we're pleased to do this to serve the church. There are those moments when it can get tense with some decisions that we make, but I think for all of us, you know, we're really trying to serve the church, but at the same time protect our composers, intellectual property, appropriate, and also, you know, go out and see what's the best thing from which to obtain from other publishers to put in our resources. Again, it's serving the church. But John Lim is always saying it: no money, no mission. I mean, we have to, you know, we have to fund the mission somehow.
That's right.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. You do hear this from some parish musicians, the kind of people who NPM. Well, why can't there be more sharing? And why can't the Bishops' Conference say, we're going to pick 2 mass settings from every publisher, and they're going to go in every hymnal, and then we'll have 10 mass settings that the whole is. I'm guessing that must not be realistic because it hasn't happened. Why not?
I think it's very simple. I think it's not very realistic just because of the size of our country. I think because of the diversity of our country, the diversity of the church in particular. We're not a smaller European country where there can be more of a national hymnal. I think a lot of us here would like the idea of at some point of a national hymnal, but I think we realize what would go into that based on the diversity of this very large serve, that may not be a possibility.
And there are very few parishes. I'm a Pew Catholic, and I've been itinerant for the last couple of years. I've settled in a parish now, but just traveling so much and going to so many parishes, one thing is that there just simply is not anything common as far as the mass settings go. That's one thing. But second of all, there's usually 1, 2, or 3 different kinds of worship resources in the pews that you go to. So you've got all kinds of publishers from which to draw, and yeah, in the same parish.
That's right.
Almost everywhere I've been, it's been that way, except for those places that are either projecting or publishing their own weekly or monthly resource.
And even in a weekly resource, you're going to see a diversity. You're going to see a lot of publishing sharing. I mean, within a parish like that. Yeah, I am amazed at the parishes that have multiple resources in their pews from different companies. They're just trying to broaden the mix. They realize in their own particular local community that there's a large there. So I'm always kind of surprised, but not really surprised. But I noticed that. I think we all noticed that.
When I first saw that phenomenon a number of years ago, I too, but now it seems perfectly normal. They're drawing from the best of what's available. And again, we talk about the diversity, even within a single parish, there's so much diversity that no one single book is sufficient for the needs of that parish. And so they may have a Floricanto and Gather, or multiple resources just to meet their needs. Really key point. Even for us as publishers, if you're publishing a single, the challenge of selecting the repertoire, knowing that it's a hymnal for use throughout the country, it's tough, isn't it? Narrowing down, what do we put in there, what do we leave out? The needs are so diverse, it can be tremendously challenging trying to determine that.
I think the other thing that's happened is that licensing has made this so much for congregations to use varieties of resources from every company. That's a positive and a negative. The positive is they can use those resources. The problem is that maybe shouldn't always use some of the resources that they use. They bring in things that maybe are not appropriate at times, or it's not as theologically correct as it should be, or things like that. And so that's when you get away from the published hymnal, which has to all be approved, and now you're building your own repertoire. It becomes a little shady from time to time.
Sure. I want to speak a bit about mass repertoire. I'd be very curious, what are you finding has taken hold and worked the best? Done mass settings from all of your publishing houses with the new Missal, Gerald Neer we've talked about, and of course the Dan Schutte one. What are you finding seems to be working the best?
Well, I think what we were surprised is that, for communities, a revised setting was a new setting. I think a lot of the publishers spend a lot of time, energy, and creative resourcing into new mass settings. But from my viewpoint at GIA, we're finding while some of the new mass settings are very popular, a lot of the revised settings were really just re-embraced. And I think that's very good. I don't think we're seeing 1 or 2 common settings rising to the top like we had 30 plus years of mass settings being sung. There was a real need to be filled. And there is too with the revised Missal, but I think it's going to be a while before we see a setting, 2 or 3 settings that are going to rise to the top. If that's going to happen again, I don't have any magic ball about.
Able to say like which 1 or 2 are selling the best?
Well, sure.
GIA?
So for GIA, actually one of the revised, the Marty Haugen's Massive Creation
is doing well.
Is surprise, is really doing very well. Tony Alonso's Mass for Joy and Peace. Some of the revised Richard Prue settings are doing very well. Community and Mass for the City. Okay. Mass for the City. Okay. And for a lot of communities, Mass for the City was a new setting and more organ-based, but we found that a lot of people are kind of gravitating towards that.
Okay. We'll see, Pete.
When we initially queried our parish customers, we were surprised. We expected them to want mass settings more than revised, but the same thing happened with us. The revised settings, Heritage, some of the other very popular settings, they wanted those back. They wanted revised settings of those, which again initially surprised us. But we're actually finding that while those were initially very popular and sold so well, the newer settings seem to be embraced now, and I don't know if it's because at the the start of the transition with the new Roman Missal, the revised settings were perhaps there was a level of comfort there. We're starting to see our newer Mass settings sell better. The Mass of Christ the Savior by Dan Schutte and Mass of Renewal by Curtis Stephen are our two top sellers at the moment. We saw both a level of comfort, but for some parishes the familiarity of the tune was a stumbling block because there were moments where it wasn't the same, and that create confusion musically, and so it was a mixed bag.
Yeah, I think with revised settings, I think a lot of parishes, what I'm finding with some of my colleagues is in a particular parish, a revised setting, while it might be familiar to a large community, a revised setting specifically that is new to a particular. So we've kind of found that that's folks that have embraced revised settings.
And we've been, and I think predictably surprised, I would say, because we have 4 or 5 that are extremely popular. Ed Bullock's Mass of St. Anne, kind of that driving contemporary setting. Also the 2 Stephen Janko, Mass of Wisdom, Mass of Redemption, one of which is revised, one of which isn't. That's kind of right in the middle. And then surprisingly Missa Simplex, which is built off of Richard Prue's Gloria Simplex.
It's really a psalm tone that
just kind of moves itself through. And then finally Michael Jonkas's Sing Praise and Thanksgiving Mass, which has been in our worship resources forever, is right there with the others. And I think for many parishes, that's something that's newly discovered, yet the Mass setting itself is over 20 years old.
Jonkas calls it spat.
We call it spat too. Sing
also.
Praise and Thanksgiving.
Now, is the Simplex just the O'Connor?
It's the O'Connor, the entire Mass setting. The Gloria itself sells very well in and of itself. And I was very surprised because it's a chant setting. Every time I would do it on the road, let's not do it accompanied. I'm at the Milwaukee Cathedral last year, gangbusters on the organ. He's got the full thing open and they're singing that setting completely It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I thought it was the dull kind of music that only I like.
No, we also found that we've really had to listen to requests. We keep track of requests, and because we have people, when are you going to revise this Mass? So even at this convention today, we're showcasing Michael Jonkas's revision of the No Greater Love Mass, and so a lot of people I think will be really heartened to see that back. But he did write a new through composed Gloria. So in this revised setting, there's new musical material, a brand new Gloria, music for the Gospel acclamation, music for the Prayer of the Faithful. So sometimes these revised settings have actually brand new literature contained in the complete Mass
Which
setting.
is what Steve Janko did that with Mass of Redemption.
Right.
Now, are you going to do Corpus Christi Prue? Will that be retooled?
Corpus Christi has been retooled.
Oh, it has?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about the older St. Louis Jesuit one that we all grew up with? That has not been reissued. Will it be?
It won't be revised. I don't know what the, that's okay. I don't know what was behind, the decision, but as you know, there were so many Mass settings from the past 30, 40 years. It was a tricky process deciding which ones would be revised and which weren't.
We take a approach. We're not known for Mass settings, but we have several now. And I think ours tend to be maybe an alternative kind of thing. They tend to be very choral and very traditional in sound, and yet they've been received well, and a lot of people license things out of those Masses in a kind of a great deal. They really need a choir almost always to do ours, and so sometimes that makes it a little harder for the services in which there's not a choir available. But we did a new Mass that by Philip Stopford that is really being received well, and it kind of has that. He's a UK composer, and so it has that, and he's Anglican, so it has the kind of lyricism that you might expect, and it was kind of interesting to see someone from outside the tradition start to look at the texts in a new way, and I kind of think that's going to happen, that there's going to be a kind of a second wave of new Masses that come along. Everything has settled down, in which people take a new look, have lived with the texts for a while, and we'll see a few more coming, I think.
So I want to turn a little bit to sort of market plans, and as you look forward, What do you say? I'm sure you have lots of planning meetings and strategic planning and all of this. What are the market challenges, the market threats out there? How are things changing? Is it around church shrinking in some parts of the country and smaller market? Is it around new media? Is it around more kind of smaller publishing houses and online things? Is it free things that are being offered? What do you perceive as the challenges, and how are you reacting?
Well, I think it can be yes to all of those things. I think what we're really struggling, I think probably all of us are struggling with the reality of, decreased mass attendance. And, because I think that really affects who's buying music, who's able to purchase music. And so people, numbers are smaller. And that depends from parish to parish, but we're seeing that. We're seeing that very much. So I see that as a very big challenge for the publishers, decreased mass attendance, and really how I don't think the church is doing enough to really try to kind of, I think we're just scratching our heads wondering why this is happening. And so I'm hoping that the church, not necessarily the publishing houses, can kind of start to grapple. I see a lot of hope with Pope Francis. I see a lot more energy. I don't know if that's going to translate into increased mass attendance, because there's the power of the charism of the person. But that is a big problem, I see, a big challenge for us.
And I think, too, that in those areas or regions where there's a shrinking Catholic population, when that happens, the shrinking musical forces happen as well. Recently in Chicago, we had a multi-publisher choral reading session. The cry was, "I need more SAB. I can't get four voices or two voices. What are you publishing for?" So as the parish might shrink, so do the musical. For us, again, serve the needs of the church. We have to respond to that in whatever way we can. And I think also, I would say yes to everything you talked about as well. Consolidation is a huge issue, especially for periodical publishers, because you may have 4 parishes coming together, 3 of them have a WLP resource, 1 has OCP, or the other way around, sure. Or a hymnal. Oh, we've never had a hymnal, we're not going to have a. And so, they're trying to get everything together under one umbrella, and I think it's a challenge. It's a huge challenge for those parishes that may have had completely different repertoires to come together and decide what to do.
Yeah, all of that is true for us as well. And areas of growth, though, that we see, this morning's plenum was about the multicultural church and how it's growing so quickly. That's an area that we're trying to address the needs of through publishing music in Spanish, Vietnamese, and other languages. That's an area of growth where we see a real need. The other area, you mentioned new media. There are parishes that are starting to project song texts or print their own worship aids, and so we are seeing that as a new frontier as well. More and more parishes are online resources or digital music. I'm sure you're seeing that as well, Mark.
So is there a reduction in hymnal and so-called missalette use because of what you just named, Wade?
I think, and David may be able to speak to this more specifically, but we are seeing that the worship aid market is shrinking and decreasing attendance, fewer parishes. So there is a decrease there that we are seeing, along with the increase in the digital resources.
And I think you see that across the board in kind of all publications. I think we sell fewer choral anthems, fewer organ books, fewer piano books, fewer, it didn't matter what genre it is, fewer recordings if they even exist, and those kinds of things. So we're living in a day in which the immediacy and how few copies we actually at times, and that's what forces prices up a little bit for people, obviously. I also think we live in a day in which you can't think of any kind of publishing that is completely healthy. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's newspaper, if it's book publishing, that we're all struggling with the fact that the digital world has created such chaos in many ways for us. And I think that it's making publishers work harder to prove themselves. I know that, for example, one thing that we face is the fact that a younger composer, I'm not going to pick on just younger composers, but I will say that it comes the most from that area in which they haven't published before, and they come to us and they have a decision. I can either self-publish this or I can take it to a publisher. They take it to us and we say, you know, this would be real good, but we need changes or we need to edit this. No, I don't want to edit, you know, so I'll just take it to self-publishing, you know. And so then it bypasses because there's this feeling that it is already perfect, you know. And that's a hard thing to. So you're now going to see out on the market a lot of self-published things. Have gone through an editing process. Right. It may not have gone through the approval processes, and they don't understand that. You want to change a word, and you say, well, you really can't change a word in the mass, and they fight you about that, and you say, well, you can't do this, you know. And
are all of you finding that kind of thing going on? Is self-publishing something you talk about a lot?
I think what we try to do is steer our composers away from it, mostly because we have the mechanisms to be able to help that music get out there, especially if it's really good, strong stuff. We have theologians on the staff. We have incredible music editors that are going to make it better. And frankly, if they refuse, sometimes it's, well, good luck and have fun with that. We wish you well, and we have to do that all the time. But I think back to the original question about shrinking markets, and for us, the bilingual resources are continually rising, whereas some of the more traditional things have a steadiness to their decline, but everything gets offset by what's growing here. Interestingly enough, digital. Probably shouldn't say this, but I will. Digital. The sale of the digital electronic copy of octavos now makes up 25% of all of our octavo sales.
So people are singing from the.
No, they're buying the PDF, hopefully paying for the number of copies that they're making, but we find that is
printing their own.
Yep, and that has just.
You're finding that too.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is great because we're not manufacturing it and shipping and people seem happy. But many of our colleagues in music publishing have when you do that, you have to buy 6 as a minimum. We're all at 1, I think.
Well, and some of I think that your three companies are less dependent upon the music dealers than our company. Our company has always had a lot stronger music dealer network, and one of our writing digital is that then it sometimes cuts them out, and so we're balancing this all the time on how do we allow this direct sale but also keep the music dealer network happy. And particularly I would say churches have separated themselves from music dealers somewhat, whereas schools are very dependent on them, so it depends on where your market is, if you have to be involved with sales through dealers or whether you can do it direct. So
I am curious about self-publishers that you're naming. Do you have the impression that in some cases, whatever you think about it, people are self-publishing and it's doing very well and it really is taking off? Or is it more like the proverbial third-party candidate? It's hard to get out there without a platform.
Let me just say, I was on a panel at the American Choral Directors this year with several people who were self-publishers, and I was the only publisher represented. And all of the people who were self-publishing were saying they didn't make any of self-publishing, but what they were making their money off of was commissions to write the music. But then they didn't make any money off of it once it was published on their websites. Spending so much money getting it up on their websites.
The other thing that's happening is who are self-publishing their own recordings. You go on Facebook and you see these, please contribute what you can to my new recording, and then they get the money that they need to. They make a recording that may not have the quality that we can produce for them, but then they come to the publisher and say, oh, it's done, will you distribute this and sell it and market it for me? You didn't have to do any of the upfront. But then we look at the texts, we look at the way the music has been presented, and it's like, that's not done. So it creates a tension even with existing composers and artists. Really tough thing to
So that I think that tension is out there, but I also think that that will maybe work itself out over time. Sometimes that people have self-published, and then they all of a sudden work with the publisher, and then they go, you know what, this was kind of a good process. I liked this. So then you see them starting to do it more. It's more about discovery sometimes. You know, get my name out. I've never been published, so I want to get my name out.
It's a starting place for some people.
Right, or it's a very unique, niche kind of approach.
Do you go out to them, or do they come to you, or both, or how do you link up with respective composers?
I think both.
Any way we can?
Yeah, it's pretty much both. A lot of them come to us, I think.
Sure, yeah, I think the majority of folks come to us, but there is a little reaching out. So I would agree. I think we'd all agree with that.
What is your experience of exhibiting at conventions like NPM or CMAA or other groups? How is that changing? I think there was a time when you would just sell a ton of CDs, and that was a cash cow, but of course that's changing now with MP3s and all of that. What are the developments in what happens in places like NPM?
We exhibit a year, and that's spread between, like conventions like NPM and ACDA, choral directors, AGO, the organ, it's all those kinds of things. And it's increasingly difficult because the amount of money that it costs to exhibit is I don't think most people would understand what
rental,
everything.
shipping.
This could not happen without us.
Right, and so, and I think NPM particularly, and I'm the industry rep board, and so I think that there's a general lack of understanding of how much money the publishers are putting in to NPM. It's harder than it used to be, and
just because the market forces the profit margins getting smaller?
Well, we find, probably shouldn't say this either, but when we do our numbers and we look at after the convention, we tend to average a per capita number.
Sure.
If there are only 1,800 people there, that number remains the same. If there are 4,000, that number remains the same. Our level of investment is about the same, if not higher, as the years go by. So we have to be much more judicious in who we're choosing to come to present. It's not easy, and we have to make difficult decisions that are sometimes not popular.
Absolutely true. We certainly don't cover our costs when we come here, ever.
Really?
That is absolutely true.
Yeah, it's very much, I think that is the perception. We make so much money coming here, but we support so much of the program, so much of the events. So I think we have to be very judicious, as Jerry said. It's really about supporting the mission. You can use phrase words like ministry of presence, being there for the people. It's much more that at this point. It is very difficult. Things we said earlier, I mean, the numbers are very low. Conferences, not just church conferences, but even some of the non-church related conferences. We go probably to about 40 conferences a year, and we have to be very careful, and we have to really streamline. It's very challenging right now.
Absolutely.
And I think that that the other thing that happens at these kinds of conventions is the fact that they draw a lot from the same people year after year after year, and so sometimes they've already purchased everything that they really are going to purchase. It's not like their new customers always more, and so that creates that kind of feeling as well. I think we're all struggling with how do we make this work financially and still support NPM and still have the presence that we need to have. But we all struggle with it.
And I think part of what has changed completely from the standpoint of the musician is the fact that we have great websites that people can visit. They can hear, see, experience the music, whereas before it was, can I order 6 review copies, and you would look at it and return it, play it on the piano. Now there's recordings of everything that's there. And I'm going to be a little critical here of my colleagues. Part of what's wonderful about NPM is actually being here. And if all we're doing is live streaming Oh, you know, last night on Facebook, oh, the opening plenum was just beautiful. I can sit here in my pajamas and go to NPM. I'm going to be able to go to the showcases, most of the showcases, without coming. I think NPM, other publishers, we really need to take a look at what we're doing in service to the people who have not paid to come here. And I think in some respects, we may be keeping people away what the richness of this hands-on people here experiences, and I know, you know, that lots of folks cannot afford this, so we're trying to provide that for them, but I think we might be just crossing the line and making this a digital experience for people online without having to leave their homes.
And the problem with that is you can't do liturgy digitally, you can't sing in parts digitally like we did at Mass this morning. You can only get that when you come. You need human contact.
Can't really replace the communal element. So much of our work in parishes is about community building, and music is the ultimate community act. And so while I applaud some efforts, you know, to help us to be present to folks who couldn't be here, I think we have to do much more to try to help people to be able to get here, because the power of being together with colleagues is a very different energy, a very different power.
And we as a company changed our whole approach to NPM scholarships this year. We decided not to give NPM the lump sum where they decide to send someone to graduate organ school. We changed all of that and said we want to use those scholarships to get people here, which is what we did. Good. And of course, part of that is the per capita spending part of getting people here. But
I think all this kind of points back to your very first question, which is there's this, you know, again, this myth out there of the money-grubbing publishers. You know, and that may have been a perception at NPM even in years past, where we were here to make money. We actually share the same mission as NPM. We're here to support music and liturgy in the church, and again, we don't cover our costs, and so why are we here? We're here to support the mission of NPM, and I think that's true for all the publishers.
And because I attend a lot of different conventions, I will say this, and I don't mean this to be critical of NPM, but I will say of all conventions that I go to, NPM is more dependent upon publisher involvement than any other convention I go to. And that makes it hard as well, because we know if we're not supportive that the organization is going to struggle.
No, and I don't want it to make it sound like, you know, we're losing our shirts.
That's right. I don't
because what we look at is that for the next several months and over the next year is when people will actually, because we know this as musicians in parishes, oh, let me go find that NPM bag that I had 3 months ago. 3 months from now, I may make my phone call or get online and do my ordering then. So it's lots of residual sales that end up happening. We may not cover the costs directly here while we're here, but our hope, of course, is that we've made that impact. Unfortunately, it's an impact on a shrinking number of people, and that's the tightrope.
Some people would say that NPM is too beholden to the publishers because you publishers are so generous. My experience of your sponsoring speakers and breakouts and all of that is huge. Do you have that impression that because you're, you know, paying the piper, you get to say we'll have that much music? Or I bet you it feels to you like NPM is really going on primarily.
I think it's an interesting mix, and I'm going to address this. And probably say some things I shouldn't, but at the same time, since you've done that a couple of times, I will.
Breaking the ice.
Probably the biggest tension has been the fact that NPM needs and wants from us, but yet they want to control what those people do, actually. So let's suppose that we propose a workshop and we with a particular person in mind. Well, they still might not do what we would like for them to do, yet we're funding it. And so the problem is there may need to be a mix of that kind of thing in which there's more allowances upon the publisher to do exactly what they want to do because we're paying for it. And then here's the part that NPM does. So here's the part that the publisher does, here's the part that NPM does, and then it all works and blends together, is the way it probably should work. And sometimes I think it's slanted one way or the other. At least that's the way I I can address this a little because I've talked to from the other companies. We are not as involved as financially as any of these three companies are involved, and I see that huge amount of money out there and NPM benefits greatly from that.
So it's somewhat of another urban myth that the publishers are calling the shots, and it's one big commercial for publishers.
I see it as more of a myth. I see a lot of, it's definitely, well, yes, it is a myth. I'm sorry, it is. Yeah. It's a terrible myth, but it's wrong. It's a lie. But but I collaboration, see NPM, diminishing numbers, I really think hopeful. I think we always in parish life we always have to work with who's there, who's showing up, and so I think with NPM and the publishers, I just feel a lot of hope for the collaborative efforts that do take place, between publisher and the association, and it's an incredible association, and I think they're struggling like many associations in our country, but I choose to be hopeful and to just try to meet people where they are, and to hopefully all of us need to keep rethinking. We out of the box. We don't always do that very well. But to keep encouraging kind of new ideas, new ways of trying to be out there, new ways to be present.
Well, I think we might end right on that hopeful note.
Yes.
I think we've done a good job of exploding some myths, and we've seen a wonderful spirit of collaboration and a few strong opinions as well. And I'm grateful. So thank you, Jerry, Wade, Mark, and David.
Thank you very much. Anthony.